This woman is pushing her BFF into a zombie horde just because she stole her fiancé. When the extreme cold apocalypse comes, her best friend comes knocking on her door with mutants. Trade your blood for our survival. Click to watch a life and death duel across 2 lifetimes. A crazy reversal from sisterly love to apocalyptic betrayal. Before the end of the world came, my wealthy best friend, who was also a reborn person, went crazy stockpiling supplies. And I looked at the balance in my bank account. Money wasn't the problem. But the problem was that I had no money. After the end of the world arrived, the global temperature dropped sharply, and the average temperature reached -90 degrees Fahrenheit. My wealthy best friend sent me photos to show off her stockpiled supplies and even teased, "If you get down on your knees and beg me, I might consider giving you a little handout." I laughed and said, "You'd better make sure you're still alive first." Due to the escape of a biochemical experiment sample from a certain laboratory, zombies rampaged all over the world. And nearly half of the people died in this catastrophe. Finally, the situation was brought under control. Homes were rebuilt. Life got back on track. And the whole country celebrated. But as I looked at the big snowflakes falling outside the window, I didn't feel the joy of having survived at all. Because I knew this was just the beginning. And the end of the world hadn't ended just because the zombies were eliminated. This wasn't some kind of ability to foresee the future. But in my previous life, I died in the extremely cold apocalypse after the zombie siege. Thinking about it now, I really hate myself for having a moment of excessive kindness back then. I let Amy, who was crying and begging me for help, saying she was cold, hungry, and sick, into my house. She came, and she also brought several burly neighbors. I tried to refuse the entry of these men, saying that I didn't have much food at home either, but she smiled at me and said, "We're all neighbors. You can't just stand by and watch us starve to death, can you?" Just like that. Although I was reluctant, I still let them into my house. I thought they would be grateful to me. But I never expected that I was inviting trouble. They took over my house, claimed my food as their own, and only gave me a small piece of cracker every day, which wasn't even enough to feed a bird that I tried to resist. But all I got in return were beatings. And in the end, I could only endure it silently. But even though I swallowed my anger, the thing I dreaded the most still happened. On the 3rd day after the food ran out, their eyes turned to me. "Keeping her alive is of no use. Why don't we just..." I never thought that the thing of people eating people would happen in reality. They held me down on the ground, and I desperately screamed and begged, "Please don't do this to me. I saved you guys." But this didn't earn me any mercy. My best friend even stepped on my face and looked at me with a face full of false guilt. "Lisa, don't blame us. We're just trying to survive." They cut my carotid artery with a knife. I was filled with hatred. I hated myself for my excessive kindness that brought trouble to my doorstep. I hated my best friend of many years and those hypocritical neighbors. After I extended a helping hand to them, they actually killed me brutally. Before I died, I swore that if I were given another chance to start over, I would definitely make them pay for their crimes with their blood. The sound of a text message on my phone interrupted my thoughts. I picked up my phone and saw that it was from the City Meteorological Bureau. Starting today, the city will experience continuous snowy and windy weather. The lowest temperature can reach -90 degrees Fahrenheit. Please citizens, do a good job of keeping warm and don't go out unless necessary. Continuous snowy and windy weather. -90 degrees Fahrenheit. I received this text message in my previous life too, and I immediately went to the supermarket and stocked up on enough food to last me for more than half a month, thinking that this way I wouldn't have to go out to buy groceries again when the extremely cold apocalypse came. I also thought thankfully that I was lucky to have stocked up on some food in advance, which saved me from the pain of hunger. If I hadn't let them in at that time. Thinking of this, I squinted my eyes, and the hatred in my heart welled up. Since God really gave me a chance to start over, I definitely won't be so overly kind again, and I will make them pay for their crimes with their blood. However, while I want to get my revenge, the most urgent thing now is to stockpile enough supplies for me to survive before the extremely cold apocalypse arrives. Calculating the time, there are only 20 days left until the extremely cold apocalypse. I know I can't wait any longer. I got out of bed and went to the desk, planning to follow the example of the heroines in apocalypse novels. Make a list of the supplies I needed. and then make large-scale purchases, but soon I discovered an important problem. Unlike the heroines in the novels, I'm poor. Looking at the pitiful 100,000 balance in my bank account, I fell into deep thought. This money is enough for me to stockpile daily necessities like food and water. But the scariest thing in the apocalypse is people's hearts. If I want to follow the example of the novels and stockpile supplies, I have to buy or rent a house, connect it to my own house as a storage warehouse, and then replace all the doors and windows with bulletproof ones and reinforce them, and this huge expense is something I can't afford at the moment. Am I destined to die in the extremely cold apocalypse? I looked dejected, but accidentally clicking on a video on my social media app gave me an idea. I end the video. A man was holding a corn cob and crying. The city is full of tricks. I want to go back to the countryside. Suddenly, I remembered that before my grandfather died, he left me an old house in the suburbs. It's not only sparsely populated and covers a large area, but most importantly, there is an air raid shelter that people built earlier to avoid wars. The shelter leads directly to the cliff behind the mountain, and the entrance is under the bed in the bedroom of the old house. The air raid shelter is warm in winter and cool in summer. As long as I do some simple repairs, it can be used as a shelter. As for the security issue, I don't have to worry at all. Most of the people there have moved to the city, and it's a vast area with few people. As long as I build a few more fences and set up traps in the yard, it will be more than enough. As long as I have enough food and water, surviving there will be much easier than in the city. With this idea in mind, I didn't hesitate any longer. I put on my clothes and went out, planning to drive to the old house to inspect it in person. As soon as I walked into the elevator, just as the elevator door was about to close, a pair of delicate woman's hands reached out and blocked the door. Wait a moment. Her voice arrived before she did. A charming woman with a good figure stepped into the elevator. When she saw me, a trace of barely noticeable contempt flashed in her eyes, and then she enthusiastically tried to link her arm with mine. Lisa, what a coincidence. Are you going out? That coquettish and affected voice, and the face that I wouldn't forget even if it turned to ashes. She was my good best friend, Amy. I evaded her outstretched hand without leaving a trace, forcibly suppressing the urge to tear her apart. I squeezed out a smile. Yeah, I'm going out to buy some food. What about you? Why are you going out when it's so cold outside? Oh, didn't they say the temperature is going to drop continuously? I'm also going out to buy some food. You're going to cook? Yeah, she answered fluently, but I noticed a flash of panic in her eyes. Based on my many years of knowing her, usually she either goes to high-end restaurants or orders takeout at home. A person who has never done any housework before, how could she possibly cook by herself? Then how about we go together? I deliberately tested her, and she declined euphemistically. No, I have an appointment with someone. How about another day? I'll treat you to dinner another day. All right then. As soon as I finished speaking, the elevator door opened, and we had arrived at the underground parking lot. I'm going to get my car first. She said goodbye to me and then walked out of the elevator. I looked at her back and was already certain that she had something to hide. So I changed my original plan and quietly followed behind her. I watched as she got into her car, and then I got my car and followed her, because I was afraid of being discovered by her. I didn't follow too closely. I only saw from a distance that she drove her car into the underground parking lot of the supermarket. Could it be that she really came to buy groceries? Was I overthinking it? After much hesitation, I still chose to follow her to see what she was really up to. I drove down to the parking lot and immediately saw her car parked in the corner. Since she wasn't in the car, she should have gone into the supermarket. I parked my car properly and then also went into the supermarket to look for her. After searching for a while, I finally saw her standing in the grain and oil section. There was also a middle-aged woman standing beside her. Judging from her clothes, she should be an employee of this supermarket, because I was afraid of being discovered by her. I didn't dare to get too close, so I couldn't hear what they were saying. Only the supermarket employee was seen taking a piece of paper passed by her and then hurriedly turning around and leaving. Could it be that she was stockpiling supplies? With this discovery, I didn't stay any longer. Instead, I rushed back to the underground parking lot before her and drove straight to the old house. Looking at the somewhat dilapidated old house, I felt a mix of emotions in my heart. Since my grandfather passed away, I hadn't been here again. Now I could only hope that this place was still habitable. That I pushed open the door, and a musty smell hit me. The living room was filled with spider webs of all sizes. Going further forward was the bedroom, which was also filled with a musty smell and spider webs. I went straight to the bed, crawled under the bed, and opened the door of the air raid shelter, using the light from my phone. I walked down the stairs. The pungent musty smell made me cough continuously. I endured the discomfort and looked around. Fortunately, although the furnishings here were somewhat moldy and damaged, it could be made habitable with just a little cleaning. I then thought of the well in the air raid shelter and quickly ran over to check it. The water was clear and not frozen, and I was overjoyed. This way, I didn't have to worry about the problem of domestic water. Then I checked the ventilation openings in the basement. As I had expected, the ventilation openings were all too dilapidated to be used. I then went back upstairs and opened all the doors and windows to disperse the unpleasant smell in the air raid shelter. After that, I went to the yard, measured the size of the yard, roughly estimated the building materials needed, and then drove away from the old house. When I got home, I thought about Amy's suspected stockpiling behavior today. In order to confirm my suspicion, I turned on the computer and retrieved the surveillance footage at my doorstep today. Her home and mine were on the same floor, and the area in front of my door was the only way for her to get home. If she was really stockpiling supplies, there must be some clues. Through the surveillance video, I saw that she returned home alone at around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Besides the bag she carried when she went out, she didn't carry anything else in her hands. Did she go home without buying anything? No. She clearly told me that she was going out to buy groceries, and she even handed a piece of paper to the supermarket employee. I patiently fast-forwarded the video and saw that at around 6 o'clock in the evening, a group of people carried boxes and boxes of things past my doorstep. I paused the video and enlarged the screen. I saw that on each of the boxes, it was clearly written, rice, noodles, oil, self-heating pots. There were all kinds of things. I roughly counted, and at least more than 50 boxes were carried into Amy's house. She was indeed stockpiling supplies. But a normal person, when knowing nothing about what will happen in the future, would definitely not stockpile supplies in such a large quantity. At this moment, I finally confirmed my suspicion. She, like me, was also a reborn person. But how did she die? In my previous life, Amy attached herself to the leader of that group of people and even sacrificed her dignity for it. According to their level of viciousness, they could completely do the same thing as they did to me and kill the other people on the same floor. But come to think of it, even if there was no shortage of food, if the power was cut off later and there were no heating facilities, they would still be frozen to death. Things seemed to be getting more and more interesting. I smiled coldly. So what if you're reborn? So what if you have money to stockpile supplies? Amy, I want to see if you have the life to live until the end. In the previous life, it was you who made me see the ugliness of human nature. In this life, of course, I also want you to see it. Thinking of this, I looked at the time and then went out and came to the small square where the ants in the neighborhood danced square dances, hearing the song of the most popular folk style playing. I still admired these ants. Whether it was extremely cold or hot, they never missed a square dance. However, I didn't come here to watch the square dance. Instead, I took the opportunity when they were taking a break from dancing and sat beside them. These ants were like the information exchange center of our community. The one in charge was Mrs. Black sitting beside me. She was a well-known gossip. Once something reached her ears, basically the whole community would know about it. If it were normal times, I would definitely stay as far away from her as possible. But now it was different. I smiled and greeted her. Mrs. Black, you're still out dancing in such cold weather. Oh, it's for the sake of exercising. Lisa, why are you sitting out here in this cold weather? This question hit the mark. I pretended to sigh helplessly. It's because I don't know what my neighbor is doing. Since this afternoon until now, she's been having people carry boxes of things home. It's so noisy that I came out to get some peace and quiet. Boxes of things. Mrs. Black became interested as soon as she heard this and quickly asked me, then what was she carrying? It seemed to be things like rice and flour. I don't know what she's stockpiling so many things for. I pretended to shrug my shoulders in confusion, seeing Mrs. Black looking thoughtful. I knew I had achieved my goal. Now the whole community should know that Amy had stockpiled a large amount of food. Then I shrank my body again and said, "Oh, it's really too cold today. I guess she should have finished moving by now. I'm going back first." Then I got up and went home. After getting home, I took out a notebook and started planning the supplies I needed to stockpile for the extremely cold apocalypse. Food was, of course, essential. There were also warm clothing items, such as down jackets, thick quilts, and hand warmers, etc. To ensure that I wouldn't be frozen to death in the severe cold of -60 degrees Fahrenheit, the building materials for repairing the old house also had to be taken into account. After all, if I provided the materials myself and hired workers for construction, it would save a lot more money than contracting the work with both materials and labor included. Of course, the most important thing was electricity. If the power was cut off after the extremely cold apocalypse, it would mean that there would be no light in the air raid shelter, and life would be worse than death. For this reason, I specifically checked. Currently, the two most suitable home power generation methods were fuel and solar power generation. The advantage of solar power generation was that there was no need to stockpile energy consumption. The disadvantage was that when there was no sunlight, it would be useless. Fuel power generation didn't require sunlight, but stockpiling fuel was a problem. After much hesitation, I still chose to have both. When there was sunlight, I would use solar power generation. If there was really a situation without sunlight, then I would switch to fuel power generation. Next was the problem of stockpiling energy consumption. Coal and firewood were definitely necessary. After all, this was related to the subsequent heating and cooking problems. Moreover, the prices of these two were not high. The average price was between $700 and $800 per ton. So I could stockpile more, but I was in a dilemma when it came to fuel. According to the current market price of regular gasoline, the price per ton was over $10,000. And this price was really not cheap. I also thought about using cheaper diesel instead. But diesel had a most fatal drawback. That is, it would produce a large amount of toxic gas when burned. Therefore, I still rejected this idea, but currently, I only had $100,000 in my hand. According to the previous plan, food and warm clothing items would probably cost about $20,000. The generator plus the battery for storing electricity would cost at least $20,000 together with the remaining $60,000. The budget for repairing the old house was between $20,000 and $30,000. So the energy consumption items had to be controlled within $30,000. According to the power of the fuel generator, I consulted the customer service and finally came to the conclusion that if I saved electricity, I would need to consume about 1 ton of gasoline a year. If I added solar power storage, I should be able to last even longer. As for the amount of coal needed, it was even more substantial. Under normal circumstances, an ordinary rural family would need to consume about 2 tons of coal in a winter. That is, about 4 months. I thought about it and decided to store at least 3 years' worth of coal. After all, coal could not only be used for heating but also for cooking. As for what would happen 3 years later, I could only take one step at a time. Finally, I determined the quantities: 1.5 tons of gasoline, 30 tons of coal, and 3 tons of wood. Next, a more serious problem emerged, which was how I should store these 1.5 tons of gasoline and ensure a high safety factor. I checked online and found that the price of this kind of fuel storage tank was around $30,000, and it needed to be placed in an open, cool place without open flames. I wasn't worried about the place. There was plenty of space in the air raid shelter, but the money aspect really gave me a headache. Currently, the $100,000 in my hand was definitely not enough. It was true to the old saying, money is not the problem. The problem is the lack of money. I smiled bitterly and looked out the window. Am I really destined to die in this catastrophe? In a moment of despair, I suddenly caught sight of my jewelry box. I remembered that my mother had left me several pieces of gold jewelry before she passed away. If I sold them, they would be worth at least $60,000 to $70,000. Although I was reluctant to part with my mother's legacies, for the sake of survival, I still made a decision. The next day, With 19 days left until the extremely cold apocalypse, I got up early in the morning, took the gold jewelry, and went to a gold store. To my surprise, the price of gold had actually increased, much higher than I had expected, watching the balance in my bank account change from 100,000 to 188,000. The worried heart in my chest finally settled. Next, I went to the building materials market and purchased building materials such as cement, steel bars, and antifreeze. After confirming the delivery time, I turned and went to the labor market. I found a foreman and told him my requirements. The courtyard wall needed to be raised, and 2 more high walls should be built. All the doors and windows should be replaced with anti-theft doors and windows, and the glass should be replaced with 4-layer bulletproof glass. Then, in the air raid shelter, rooms should be partitioned according to the layout I designed. Energy-saving lamps should be connected, and a generator and a storage battery should be installed. Of course, I had already purchased the generator and other items from Amazon yesterday, and they would be delivered to my door tomorrow. After confirming that the construction period could be completed within 10 days, I bargained with the foreman. Finally, we agreed on a price. He was also a bit curious and asked me, "Little girl, what are you going to do by repairing this old house like this?" I just smiled at him and said, "I'm going to stockpile supplies for the winter." And I also kindly reminded him, "This winter is likely to be very long. Why don't you guys also stockpile some food to avoid going out to buy groceries and getting cold?" Of course, I didn't care whether he would listen or go to stockpile food. After telling the foreman the address of the old house and paying the deposit, I went to a large food wholesale market and bought rice, flour, soybean oil, vegetables that could be stored for a long time, and a large quantity of frozen pork, beef, and chicken. After also agreeing on the delivery time, I finally returned home exhausted and turned on the surveillance video at the door again. Today, no one came to deliver goods to Amy's house. Instead, she brought back a man. This man was none other than Jack, who had cut my throat with a knife back then and was also the leader of that group of people that I in my previous life. Amy had hooked up with him only after the extremely cold apocalypse. Could it be that in this life, in order to find a backer, she had hooked up with Jack in advance? Jack's viciousness was well known in this area. Plus, he had learned martial arts before, so no one dared to provoke him. If it was really as I thought, that Amy had hooked up with Jack in advance, then things would really be difficult to handle. After all, with Jack's forceful suppression and Amy's large-scale stockpiling of supplies with her financial resources, the two of them might really manage to survive until the end of the extremely cold apocalypse. By then, it would be even more difficult for me to get my revenge. Thinking of this, I frowned, but soon I noticed something was wrong. In the video, the two of them were pushing and shoving, and it seemed that they had had an argument. I somewhat regretted that when I installed the surveillance camera, in order to save money, I hadn't chosen one with a recording function. Otherwise, I would have known what they were arguing about. At this moment, I suddenly remembered a lip-reading app that I had downloaded out of curiosity before. With a try-it-out attitude, I downloaded the video of the two of them arguing and uploaded it to the app. I had thought that in this way, I would be able to know all their conversations. But in fact, even after I subscribed to the membership, I could only recognize 2 words: divorce and shrew. Looking at these 2 words, I suddenly remembered that when Amy had brought Jack and the others to my house, there had indeed been a woman with them. Her name was Fiona, and the people around Jack all called her sister-in-law. Back then, Amy had had an affair with Jack in order to have a backer, and she had been beaten up by Fiona several times, and Jack had just watched coldly without stopping it. What impressed me the most was that at that time, Fiona had even tried to stop Jack from killing me. Although she hadn't been able to save me, she had still given me the only warmth before I died. It seemed that Fiona was my breakthrough. Thinking of this, I immediately switched to my alternate account, opened the community homeowners group, found Fiona's account from my memory, and successfully added her as a friend. After she approved the friend request, Fiona politely said to me, "Hello, is there anything I can help you with?" I then replied, "Hello." And I sent her the video of Amy and Jack pulling and pestering in the corridor. In fact, at the moment I sent it, I was a bit nervous in my heart, not knowing what Fiona's attitude would be after seeing it, although even if she took the video to confront Jack, It wouldn't expose my existence. It might alert them prematurely. As time passed by, Fiona's silence made my heart hang in the air. Could it be that she had really gone to argue with Jack? I had even started to consider whether I should come up with a new plan when Fiona's message finally came back. Who are you? How did you get this video? My heart that had been hanging in the air finally relaxed. Everything was going as smoothly as I had expected. I then smiled and replied, "It doesn't matter who I am. What matters is that your husband and Amy are plotting a major event that concerns life and death." Seeing that she didn't reply, I continued. "You should have heard that Amy has been stockpiling a large amount of supplies recently. Aren't you curious about why?" After another moment of silence, Fiona sent another message. "Let's meet." When I saw that she was inviting me to meet, I hesitated a bit. The reason why I chose to add her with an alternate account was to not expose my true identity, but then she sent another message. "If you don't even dare to meet me, how can I know if I can trust you?" After much hesitation, for the smooth progress of the plan and also out of trust in her for trying to save me back then, I still agreed and made an appointment with her to meet at a coffee shop some distance away from the community tomorrow afternoon. There were 18 days left until the extremely cold apocalypse. That I drove to the old house early in the morning and saw that the building materials had already been delivered, and the workers had already started working. That I greeted the foreman, then took the ventilation device that I had bought yesterday, which could be freely opened and closed, and went to the basement. I removed the old and dilapidated ventilation openings and installed the new ventilation device. After the installation was completed, I went back upstairs again and saw that the generator and the storage battery had already been delivered, and the installation workers for the solar generator had also come. I watched as they installed the generators one by one and connected them to the storage battery. Then, at noon, the rice and other food that I had purchased yesterday were also delivered. I arranged for the delivery workers to place them in the locations that I had planned in advance. Only then did I realize that it was almost time for my appointment with Fiona. I gave the foreman a few instructions and then drove away from the old house, because the road was slippery due to the snow. I didn't drive fast. When I arrived at the agreed-upon coffee shop, Fiona had already arrived and was sitting quietly in the corner waiting for me. I walked over with a smile and said, "Hello." She suddenly raised her head, and a trace of surprise flashed in her eyes. "Why is it you? Weren't you and Amy good friends?" I didn't deny her words. I just said, "We were before, but unfortunately, we aren't now." Then I sat down opposite her. "Oh." Her expression returned to calmness, and she continued to ask, "What's your purpose of sending me the video of Jack and Amy?" I smiled calmly. "Because the enemy of an enemy is a friend. So I want to be friends with you." "You want me to help you deal with Amy?" "No, I want you to help me deal with Jack." When she heard me say this, she laughed out loud. The way she looked at me was as if she was looking at a crazy person. "Lisa, are you okay? Why would I help you deal with my husband? Just because he had an affair and hooked up with Amy?" "No." I shook my head. "Because I know you want to kill him." Her face changed drastically, and her emotions suddenly became a bit agitated. She even stood up from her seat, pointed at me, and scolded in a low voice. "Lisa, stop talking nonsense. Are you crazy? Why on earth would I want to kill my husband?" "No, you do want to. And I will be your best ally." The reason why I was so certain was that after Jack occupied my house, I saw Fiona holding a knife and trying to stab Jack to death several times, although I didn't know whether she succeeded later. The hateful look in her eyes when she looked at Jack wasn't just because of his affair. I smiled and looked directly into her eyes. I was taking a gamble that she would form an alliance with me. There was another moment of silence. She looked at me, and I looked at her. Finally, she sat down again, stared at me, and said in a solemn voice, "Why should I trust you?" I smiled because I knew I had won the bet. So I told her what Jack and Amy had done to me before I was reborn. After hearing this, she looked completely incredulous and exclaimed, "This is really too unbelievable." "Yeah." She nodded. That I then continued to say to her, "Whether you believe it or not, this is the reason why I want to deal with Jack and Amy. Now, are you willing to form an alliance with me?" She didn't speak. Her eyes looking at me were full of scrutiny, as if she was considering whether what I said was true or false. After a long time, she finally said, "I need time to think about it." Since she said that, I just nodded and said, okay, then I'll leave now. If you figure it out, send me a message. After saying that, I paid the bill and turned to leave. There were 17 days left until the extremely cold apocalypse that I started using my connections to find someone. Finally, by using the connections of my deceased parents, I found Mr. Thomas. He was a close friend of my parents and had watched me grow up, although he wasn't in this city now. He still helped me use his connections to find someone and successfully purchased 1.5 tons of gasoline and a professional fuel storage tank for me, also out of trust and gratitude for him. When he asked me, Lisa, what do you need to buy so much gasoline for? I revealed to him the possibility of the extremely cold apocalypse and told him to stockpile as many supplies as possible, and I advised him that if conditions allowed, he should try to stay away from the city. After all, in the face of a catastrophe, human nature was the most terrifying thing. Of course. Whether he believed me or not after I said that was beyond my control, there were 16 days left until the extremely cold apocalypse that I hired workers to repair the heating facilities and asked them to check the heating facilities in the basement. Fortunately, after so many years of exposure to the elements, the heating facilities in the basement were still in good condition. Only a simple cleaning and reinforcement were needed, and they could be used normally. There were 15 days left until the extremely cold apocalypse. Fiona finally sent me a message, inviting me to meet at the coffee shop where we met last time. I arrived on time for the appointment. I saw her sitting in the old position, drinking coffee. When she saw me coming, she waved at me. I walked over and sat down opposite her. I found that her face seemed a bit pale today, and there was a dark bruise under her eye. As if she had been beaten, she seemed to notice that I was looking at the injury under her eye. She smiled bitterly and said, "Don't guess. It was Jack who hit me." I was a bit surprised because in my previous life, I had never seen Jack lay a hand on Fiona. Could it be that, while I was still thinking, Fiona spoke again? "I've thought it over. I agree to form an alliance with you, but you have to promise me one thing." "Go ahead. Take my daughter away and ensure her safety." "Your daughter?" I was taken aback for a moment. I knew that she and Jack had a daughter, but I remembered that after the extremely cold apocalypse, I hadn't seen her daughter anymore. It was said that she had been sent to her grandmother's house in the countryside, but now she suddenly asked me to take her daughter away. Could it be that her daughter hadn't been sent to her grandmother's house back then? But the speculation in my heart made me shudder. I wanted to open my mouth to ask, but Fiona spoke first. "Jack is a beast. He owes a huge amount of gambling debts and wants to sell my daughter to pay off the debts. I'm a mother. How could I?" Fiona was already sobbing uncontrollably when she said this. I suddenly understood why Fiona wanted to kill Jack. They say even a tiger won't eat its cubs. But I never expected that Jack would actually. "I will help you kill Jack. In exchange, you must ensure the safety of my daughter." When she raised her head again, there was a determination in her eyes that I had never seen before. Fiona reminded me of my deceased mother. In that car accident back then, it was my mother who sacrificed her life to protect me, allowing me to survive. My heart was touched, and I nodded solemnly at her. "Don't worry, even if you really can't kill Jack, I will still protect your daughter's safety." She then smiled at me. "I trust you." Then she didn't say anything more and directly got up and left the coffee shop. There were 14 days left until the extremely cold apocalypse. I tried to contact Fiona, wanting to ask her how she was going to take action and whether she needed my help. But she only replied to me with, "No need. Remember what you promised me." There were 13 days left until the extremely cold apocalypse. I went to the Love wholesale market and purchased cold-proof items such as camel wool blankets, down jackets, cotton shoes, electric blankets, and hand warmers. As for coal and wood, I chose to buy them in large quantities on eBay. Firstly, the price was low, and secondly, they would be directly delivered to my home, saving a lot of trouble. There were 12 days left until the extremely cold apocalypse. I went to the seasoning wholesale market and purchased essential seasonings such as salt and monosodium glutamate. In the afternoon, I also went to a seed market, thinking of buying a batch of vegetable seeds that had no demand for sunlight, so that I could achieve self-sufficiency in the air raid shelter. When I saw the rice seeds, I hesitated. Rice was my favorite staple food, but its growing conditions were really too demanding. It required more than 6 hours of sunlight exposure every day, which couldn't be achieved in the air raid shelter. In fact, I had also thought about building a greenhouse in the yard for growing rice, but the cost was too high, and I simply didn't have that budget. Of course, I also thought about simulating sunlight with lights, but I rejected that idea because it would consume too much electricity. Finally, I gave up the idea of growing rice and left the seed market. There were 11 days left until the extremely cold apocalypse. Fiona hadn't contacted me for 3 days. I was a bit worried and even began to suspect that she had given up the idea of killing Jack. I tried to contact her again, but she didn't reply to me either. There were 10 days left until the extremely cold apocalypse. Mrs. Black downstairs said that Fiona had an argument with Jack last night, and when Fiona went downstairs to take out the trash this morning, she was covered in injuries. I was a bit worried. Was it that Fiona's intention to kill Jack had been discovered? I tried to contact her again, but still didn't get a reply, until the evening. I couldn't sit still anymore. I went to her house to find her, but it was Jack who opened the door. I could only make an excuse that I wanted to borrow a screwdriver to fix something. And then I left with the screwdriver he handed me. There were 9 days left until the extremely cold apocalypse. The foreman informed me that the work had been completed and asked me to go over and check to see if there were any places that needed to be modified. I looked at the completely renovated old house and the 3 high walls and nodded in satisfaction. After getting my satisfactory reply, the workers carried out the final wall filling and then reminded me not to touch the walls within 7 days to prevent the walls from deforming before they were completely dry. I thanked them, settled the labor cost, and then drove to the supermarket and bought a batch of self-heating foods, canned foods, and other instant foods. Although these kinds of foods were relatively expensive, they tasted really delicious and had a long shelf life. They could be used to improve my diet in the later stage of the apocalypse when the diet was monotonous. That night, when I got home and saw that Fiona still hadn't contacted me, I knew I couldn't wait any longer and had to come up with another solution. But just as I was racking my brains not knowing what to do, the sound of a police siren suddenly came from outside the window. I looked out of the window curiously and saw a police car parked downstairs in my building. Then I saw someone in the community group shouting, "There's been a murder." I thought something was wrong. I quickly put on a coat and ran out, taking the elevator downstairs. As soon as I walked out of the elevator, I saw Fiona with blood all over her face, wearing handcuffs and being escorted out. Behind her was a little girl crying loudly, hugging her leg and shouting, "Don't arrest my mom. My mom is a good person." I stood there, and Fiona saw me too. She smiled at me, took one last look at her daughter, and then was taken away. I came to her daughter's side and held her in my arms. "Don't cry. Your mom." I wanted to comfort her, but as I spoke, I started crying myself. At this moment, I felt a mix of emotions in my heart, and I even began to regret involving Fiona in this mess. If I hadn't found her, hadn't exposed her intention to kill Jack, and hadn't told her about forming an alliance, would she not have done this? I was still filled with regret when the little girl reached out and wiped the tears on my face. She choked and said, "Are you Aunt Lisa?" My mom said that from now on, I should follow you. My mom also asked me to tell you that she has fulfilled her wish and asked you not to blame yourself. Hearing her words, I cried even harder. It took me a while to calm down. I reached out and touched her head. "What's your name?" My name is Lily." "Okay, then from now on, will you live with Aunt Lisa?" "Lily, what about Mom? Will Mom come back?" Looking into Lily's innocent eyes, I couldn't bear to tell her the truth. I could only force a smile and say, "Yes, when Lily grows up, Mom will come back. Then Lily will grow up quickly, so that I can see Mom soon. Okay, then Lily has to work hard." With a sigh, I took her hand and led her back to my home. There were 8 days left until the extremely cold apocalypse. The gasoline was delivered in the special oil storage barrels I had purchased. I placed it in the deepest part of the basement, near the ventilation opening of the cliff. There were 7 days left until the extremely cold apocalypse. The coal and wood I had ordered on eBay were delivered. Lily blinked her big eyes and asked me, "Aunt Lisa, what are you going to do with so many things?" I smiled at her and reached out to touch her head. "To live here in the future." Through these days of getting along with Lily, I found that she was really obedient and had never even clamored for her mother. This kind of obedience that was different from children of the same age made me feel very sorry for her. How many grievances must she have suffered to become like this? You know. She was only 7 years old. There were 6 days left until the extremely cold apocalypse that I counted the supplies again. After confirming that there was no omission, I saw that there was still more than 10,000 left in the card. I decided to take Lily to have a good meal. As for what to eat, in this cold weather of more than 20 degrees below zero, of course, hot pot was the best to warm up the body. I took Lily to a hot pot restaurant where it was said that even the meat for boiling was high-grade Wagyu beef. Looking at the menu, a plate of meat cost more than 100. If it were in normal times, I would definitely stand up and leave, but what time was it now? The extremely cold apocalypse was coming soon. Money was just a number. You couldn't bring it with you when you were born, and you couldn't take it with you when you died. Thinking of this, I decisively ordered a double flavor hot pot. One half was Sichuan spicy flavor, and the other half was bone soup. I also ordered 5 plates of Wagyu beef, grouper slices, lobster meatballs, and vegetables. I also specially ordered ice cream and cake that children liked for Lily. After waiting for a while, the pot boiled and the dishes were all served. I was about to boil a piece of meat for Lily to eat when a familiar high-pitched voice came from behind. Yo Lisa, it's really you. Why are you with a child? Could it be your illegitimate child? Without any scruples about the mockery, I didn't even need to look to know that the person behind was Amy. I turned around and saw that she was holding a man on her arm. And there was undisguised mockery and contempt in her eyes when she looked at me. Jack was dead, and she had lost her forceful support. She actually still had the leisure to go out and hook up with a man for a meal. I really didn't know if she had a big heart or had a backup plan. I rolled my eyes at her, too lazy to pay attention to her. I picked up the chopsticks and boiled a piece of meat, put it in Lily's bowl, and watched her eat it. Then I boiled a piece for myself. I thought that Amy would leave after getting snubbed. But unexpectedly, when she saw that I didn't speak, she became even more excited. She pretended to frown and said, Lisa, you're not angry with me, are you? I was just joking with you. Don't take it seriously. Her affected tone made me feel goosebumps all over. I couldn't help but retort. Did you do a gorilla imitation makeup today? Look, it's exactly the same as this. As I said this, I deliberately took out a photo of a gorilla with eyeshadow and lipstick on and showed it to her. She was so angry that her face turned black. But in order to maintain her gentle image, she couldn't lose her temper directly. She could only squeeze out a few tears and look at me pitifully. Lisa, we've been good sisters for so many years. How can you compare me to a gorilla? I curled my lips and imitated her tone just now. Oh, Amy, you're not angry, are you? I was just joking with you. Don't take it seriously. Amy was so angry that she pointed at me, just as she was about to speak. Lily, sitting beside me, opened her mouth. Aunt Lisa, I've seen this aunt before. She used to be with my dad. It seemed that she didn't know how to describe it. Lily frowned and thought for a while, and then said with a smile, Oh, right. This aunt used to kiss my dad. I didn't expect Lily to say such a thing suddenly. I saw the man beside Amy turn black. He asked her coldly, What's going on here? It was obvious that Amy panicked. She pointed at Lily and angrily scolded, You little kid. Stop talking nonsense. Then she tried to flatteringly hold the man's arm, but was pushed away. I saw the man say, You can just go back to your own home from now on. Don't come to find me again. Then he left in a huff. I then realized that this man was the new backer that Amy had found. But unfortunately, it seemed that he wasn't anymore now. Henry listened to my explanation. Amy chased out with a worried face, stepping on her high heels. Maybe she was in a hurry. She lost her balance and fell on her face. But she still endured the pain and got up and walked out. After a while, Amy suddenly ran back with a furious face, pointed at my nose and cursed. Lisa, tell me, did you teach her? Obviously, she had gone out to explain and then came back after hitting a wall, and was taking her anger out on me. I didn't indulge her either. I sneered and said, You messed things up yourself. And now you're blaming me. If I were you, I'd leave quickly to avoid embarrassing yourself here. At this time, she also noticed that everyone in the restaurant was pointing at her. She was so angry that she stamped her foot, left a sentence, "We'll see," and turned to leave. I looked at her back and knew that this time she really hated me, but so what? I still hadn't settled the score with her from my previous life. I don't know if it was because I felt so comfortable after retorting that scheming woman. Lily and I ate up all the food in this meal. After we were full, Lily and I burped. Then we called the waiter to pay the bill. It was $3,899. And they even rounded it down, only charging me $3,800. I couldn't help but sigh. As expected of a high-end hot pot restaurant, they rounded down so generously. I took Lily and got up to leave. I didn't go home directly. Instead, I took her to the home appliance market and bought a portable DVD player and several large-capacity USB flash drives. Maybe this thing was really not easy to sell. The boss was very happy and gave me a bunch of old Korean drama discs, saying that I could use them to play when I got home. I connected these USB flash drives to the computer and downloaded TV dramas, variety shows, movies, and cartoons that children like to watch respectively, you know. This would be the only entertainment tool for Lily and me when we were staying in the air raid shelter in the future. Of course, I also specially checked the power consumption. It was 0.025 kilowatt hours per hour. Even if we watched it for a whole day, it would be less than 1 kilowatt hour while waiting for the download to be completed. I turned on the surveillance video again. Sure enough, as I had guessed, Amy hadn't gone home since Jack died. That man should be the new backer she had found, but today, her backer was accidentally angered away by Lily. I wonder if he would still want her. That night, I specially went downstairs to chat with Mrs. Black and the others, and revealed that Amy had a previous record of hooking up with married men. Fiona accidentally killed Jack by mistake during an argument because she found out about the affair between Jack and Amy. There were 5 days left until the extremely cold apocalypse. Overnight, the news that Amy liked to hook up with married men spread throughout the community. Women in every household were warning their husbands not to have any contact with Amy, not even to talk to her. I saw through the surveillance video that she went home looking dejected. I guessed that she had lost another backer, and it was impossible for her to have a backer in the future. There were 4 days left until the extremely cold apocalypse. I took Lily to the Love wholesale market again and bought her some more down jackets and other cold-proof items. When I got home, through the surveillance video, I found that Amy had started stockpiling supplies again. I guessed that because she had lost her backer again, she wanted to rely on herself and stay at home, looking at the batches of goods being delivered passing by my doorstep. And there were all kinds of things. I couldn't help but sigh. Sure enough, when a wealthy woman is reborn, she goes into the crazy stockpiling mode. But unfortunately, Amy made a most fatal mistake. Although she had stockpiled a large amount of supplies, she didn't reinforce or replace the doors and windows. I don't know if she forgot or just didn't think of this day at all. With this discovery, I smiled. It was really that even God was helping me. There were 3 days left until the extremely cold apocalypse. I took pots, pans, the portable DVD player, USB flash drives, discs, and commonly used medicines purchased from the pharmacy, and officially moved into the old house with Lily. I also set up all kinds of traps in the yard to prevent any intruders from climbing over the wall. There were 2 days left until the extremely cold apocalypse. I still felt that the traps at the door weren't safe enough. So I drove to an equipment store with Lily, and selected a baseball bat and a naginata. Then we went to the dog market, picked out several fierce dogs, and brought them back to the old house. We kept them in the air raid shelter. If there really were people who could withstand the low temperature of -60 degrees Fahrenheit, climb over the 3 high walls, avoid the traps all over the yard, break through the reinforced anti-theft door and enter the old house, and successfully find the entrance to the air raid shelter, then these fierce dogs and weapons would be my last hope. Of course, this possibility was almost zero. On the last day before the extremely cold apocalypse, I didn't go out again. Instead, I stayed in the carefully arranged air raid shelter with Lily, eating stewed chicken with mushrooms and watching old Korean dramas, waiting for the arrival of the extremely cold apocalypse. On the day of the extremely cold apocalypse, I was awakened by a chill. Seeing that Lily was still asleep, I stretched and got out of bed. I added some coal to the heating facilities. When I felt that the room was warm again, I cooked some porridge and woke Lily up for breakfast while we were still eating. A reminder text message came from the City Meteorological Bureau. Starting from today, the city will welcome the lowest temperature in history, -35 degrees Fahrenheit. To ensure the safety of all citizens, business places such as supermarkets will be suspended. Please do not go out unless necessary. The community homeowners group also exploded at this time. What on earth is this crazy weather? Didn't they say the lowest temperature was going to be -20 degrees Fahrenheit before? Yeah, I thought it was cold yesterday. But today the temperature dropped by 15 degrees Fahrenheit. Everyone, don't go out. I just wanted to go out and buy some food. But as soon as I went out of the unit door, I was frozen back. You still went out to buy food. Didn't you see the text message notice? Shopping malls, supermarkets, and the like have all closed down. Then what should we do? The food in my house is only enough for 1 or 2 days. Looking at my dear neighbors chatting one after another, I didn't say anything. I sneered in my heart. This is just the beginning. My dear neighbors. After drinking the porridge, I didn't continue to look at the group. It was just a bunch of complaints anyway. I put my phone aside according to the timeline. The internet and electricity wouldn't be cut off for the time being. But in the near future, when the power plant ran out of energy and no one continued to replenish it, there would inevitably be a power outage. Before that, I had to store as much electricity as possible for the days after the power outage. Thinking of this, I found all the things at home that could store electricity and charged them all. Then I went to the reserve planting room, rolled up my sleeves, and started plowing the land. Maybe I hadn't done any rough work for a long time. After working for a while, I was out of breath and my back and waist were sore. But looking at the piece of land that had taken shape in front of me, I suddenly felt a great sense of achievement that I decided to keep going. I swayed my sore waist and plowed out another piece of land in one go before stopping to rest for a while. After watering the land, I planted the prepared seeds, wiping the sweat from my forehead. I processed the bean sprout seeds and mushroom spawn bags. Only then did I realize that it was already noon, that I simply made something for Lily and me to eat, fed the dogs, and then lay on the bed feeling idle. When I picked up my phone, I saw the news that people had been frozen to death. A sense of sadness welled up in my heart that I don't know when this catastrophe will end, and whether I can survive until the day when I see the dawn again. On the second day of the extremely cold apocalypse, the temperature dropped again. The low temperature of -45 degrees Fahrenheit made people miserable. But I was drinking tea, growing vegetables, and watching TV dramas with Lily, feeling peaceful and comfortable. On the third day of the extremely cold apocalypse, at -55 degrees Fahrenheit, the heavy snow blocked the door. Someone began to ask in the group, "Does anyone have any extra food? There's nothing to eat in my house." On the fourth day of the extremely cold apocalypse, the temperature suddenly reached -60 degrees Fahrenheit. There were no more messages from the city meteorological station. I knew that the city had completely collapsed after all. No one could go out in the weather of -60 degrees Fahrenheit. Even if they could, the severometer high snow at the door was an insurmountable problem. I checked the ventilation openings. Fortunately, they weren't blocked by the snow. I couldn't help but sigh. Fortunately, I had chosen long tube ventilation at that time. And luckily, most of the ventilation openings here were against the cliff, so there wouldn't be any snow accumulation problems. On the fifth day of the extremely cold apocalypse, the mushroom spawn bags I had planted had started to grow small mushrooms, and the bean sprouts had also started to germinate. I brewed a pot of hot tea for myself, lay on the bed with an electric blanket on, and watched cartoons with Lily. Then I heard the ding sound of my phone, which was the notification sound of a message that I had set the group chat to do not disturb. Who could be sending me a message at this time? I picked up my phone and smiled. It was Amy, who sent me photos to show off her stockpiled supplies. And she also sent a voice message triumphantly. "Did you see my stockpiled supplies?" Yeah. And then, I really doubted that she had no common sense. Didn't she know the principle that one shouldn't show off their wealth? She seemed not very satisfied with my reaction and sent another voice message. "Lisa, you should have run out of supplies by now. Right. If you're willing to kneel down and beg me, I can consider giving you a little." I was too lazy to pay attention to her. I switched the chat interface to the community group and saw that my dear neighbors were all complaining. constantly asking if anyone had any stockpiled food and if they could share some. I smiled and sent the photos of Amy's stockpiled supplies that she had sent me to the group. As expected. As soon as the photos were sent, the group started to me like crazy, asking if I could share some of my stockpiled food with them. I remained silent until they were getting a bit impatient and started to launch verbal attacks and moral kidnappings on me. I replied, "These photos aren't mine. Amy sent them to me. She should have extra food at her house." I sneered as I looked at their ugly faces. Sure enough, in the face of life and death, my dear neighbors had revealed their true colors. Sure enough, after hearing this, they started to Amy like crazy. Then Amy's phone call came through. "Lisa, are you crazy? You sent the photos of my stockpiled supplies to the group. Do you want to kill me?" Her furious shouting made my ears ache. I rubbed my ears and then pretended to suddenly understand. "Oops. I accidentally sent it out by mistake." "Then why didn't you recall it? Are you a pig? Why did you tell them it was me?" But they asked me. I couldn't just not answer, could I? "You, Lisa, you." She was so angry that she cursed at me, but I just chuckled and said, "The signal is bad. I won't talk anymore." Then I hung up the phone. Soon she called again. I was too lazy to listen to her nonsense and hung up directly. She called again and I hung up again. After several cycles, I lost my patience and directly blocked her number. "Lisa, why are you treating me like this after all these years of being friends? I won't bother with you about that little girl's nonsense last time. Now you go to the group immediately and tell them this isn't my house. Lisa." Amy's WeChat messages came one after another. I stopped pretending with her and directly replied, "Aren't these the things you did to me before? I don't understand what you're talking about. Anyway, you go and clarify for me in the group right now. If you do, I can still consider sharing some food with you." Even at this moment, she still hoped that I would help her clarify. Such a stupid person. I actually died at her hands in my previous life. I sneered and replied, "Stop pretending. I know you're a reborn person." "What a coincidence. I am too." "What reborn? I don't know what you're talking about. Weren't we good best friends?" "Lisa, you can't treat me like this." Seeing that she was still pretending to be stupid, I simply ignored her and just replied, "I advise you to use this time to act cute in the group and see if your dear, big brothers can spare your life." After saying that, I ignored her and directly switched the chat interface back to the group. My dear neighbors had started to change from pleading to being furious. And they even cursed at Amy, calling her heartless and selfish for not helping when others were in need. At first, Amy chose to remain silent, until someone started discussing going to knock on her door. She panicked and came out and said, "I just saw everyone's messages. I don't have any extra food at my house either. That photo isn't mine. She's framing me." Her reputation had already been so bad that it couldn't get any worse under my deliberate disclosure and Mrs. Black's intentional spreading. How could everyone believe her lies? They all cursed at her, saying that she was just selfish and clearly had food at home but refused to share it with everyone. Seeing this, I also added, "I said you can just go to her house and see if she has any food or not." After saying that, I didn't forget to add another sentence. "Amy, I think with so much food in your house, you should just take it out and share it with everyone to get through this difficult time together." I almost burst out laughing. Who doesn't know how to use moral kidnapping? Wasn't that what she said to me in my previous life? Sure enough, as soon as I said this, the neighbors were highly enthusiastic and kept ing Amy. What she said is right. If you have nothing to hide, just open the door and let us in to take a look. Right. Exactly. If we really misunderstood you, we'll apologize to you. I live downstairs from her. Is there anyone who wants to go and take a look with me? I'll go too. I'm in the same unit as her. Seeing that the neighbors in the same unit had started to organize and discuss going to her house to find out the truth, Amy panicked. When she found that her sophistry was useless, she tried to shift the blame onto me again. "It really isn't me. I think these photos are from her own house. She accidentally sent them out by mistake. She framed me because she doesn't want to share the food with you guys. If you don't believe me, go to her house and take a look. She must have food at her house. Of course." She was so sure that I had stockpiled supplies because she knew that I had the habit of stockpiling food on a regular basis. Otherwise, why would she have come to me for help in my previous life? She must have been thinking that if the neighbors found out that I had food at home, they would use me as a shield to protect her own safety, but unfortunately, her plan backfired. I directly sent the door-opening password of my house in the group and also added a sentence. I'm trapped in the suburbs and can't go back at all. If you don't believe me, go and check for yourselves. Then I closed the group chat and stopped watching their squabbling. On the 6th day of the extremely cold apocalypse, the snowstorm outside stopped, and the temperature stabilized at -60 degrees Fahrenheit. Through the group chat, I saw that my dear neighbors had successfully broken through Amy's anti-theft door and discovered the large amount of supplies she had stockpiled at home. They took these supplies for themselves, saying that they would distribute them uniformly, but I knew that in the end, it would still be the one with the most power who would have the final say. As for Amy's fate, I wasn't really curious. After all, it was easy to guess how a person who had stockpiled so many supplies but still refused to share them with others would be treated. On the 7th day of the extremely cold apocalypse, the reserved electricity in the power plant was exhausted. The internet and electricity were cut off, and the whole city was paralyzed. I started using the storage battery for power supply. On the 8th day of the extremely cold apocalypse, I found that the solar generator couldn't generate electricity. I guessed that it was because the solar panels were covered with snow, but fortunately, I had a backup plan. When the electricity in the storage battery was exhausted, I could still generate electricity with gasoline. At this moment, I suddenly thought of Amy. It seemed that all she had stockpiled was a solar generator. Right. I really wanted to know how they would get through the difficulties when there was a power outage. The heating measures couldn't operate, and the solar panels were covered with snow, but even if they really managed to find a way to remove the snow, it would be useless. The buildings all had centralized heating. Without anyone to burn the boiler, they could only rely on electronic devices for heating. But how could the electricity from the solar panels support the huge power consumption? In the end, the fate waiting for them was to be frozen to death. I sat by the fireplace, warming myself by the fire. Thinking of this, I thought I would feel the joy of getting my revenge. But instead, a trace of sadness welled up in my heart. Sure enough, when facing the disasters of nature, humans are always so vulnerable. On the 9th day of the extremely cold apocalypse, I went about my usual business of farming and watering the land. And then I had a meal, watched TV dramas with Lily, and happily stayed at home like a homebody. On the 15th day of the extremely cold apocalypse, I had already eaten the mushrooms I had planted, and the vegetables I had planted had also taken root, sprouted, and grown into seedlings. I cooked a pot of winter melon and spare rib soup. Lily and I sat by the fireplace, sipping the soup, eating the spare ribs, and giggling as we watched our favorite rural-themed TV drama. In the first month of the extremely cold apocalypse, the reserved electricity had long been exhausted. I started using the fuel generator for power supply. To save energy, I only turned on one energy-saving lamp at night when needed, and during the day, the light came from the ventilation openings and the firelight of the fireplace. In the second month of the extremely cold apocalypse, I felt lonely for the first time. Without the internet, I could only watch the downloaded TV dramas, variety shows, and movies over and over again all day long. Even a homebody like me who was used to staying at home couldn't stand such a life, but fortunately, I still had Lily, and I also had several fierce dogs. When I was bored, I could chat with Lily and play frisbee with the dogs. Otherwise, I was sure I would go crazy. In the third month of the extremely cold apocalypse, I seemed to feel that the temperature was warming up a bit, but since the internet had long been paralyzed and I had no way to check the outside temperature, I didn't know if it was just my illusion. In the fourth month of the extremely cold apocalypse, the electricity suddenly came back. Although it was intermittent and there were frequent power outages, it still gave me great hope. In the 4.5 months of the extremely cold apocalypse, the internet suddenly came back, and I received the first text message in 4.5 months. Hello, citizen. The temperature has shown a warming trend. Through our efforts, we have stabilized the electricity and the internet. Let's face the difficulties together and strive to restore our beautiful homeland. I was so excited that I jumped up from the bed. I looked at the text message with tears streaming down my face. Was all this finally coming to an end? In the 5th month of the extremely cold apocalypse. Although I still couldn't go out. The gas had also been restored. I sat by the fireplace, eating skewers and browsing the news on the internet, knowing that the dawn was about to arrive. I end the 6th month of the extremely cold apocalypse. The temperature had recovered to -15 degrees Fahrenheit. Although it was still very cold, people could at least travel normally with the support of the country. The city started to operate again. Shopping malls and supermarkets began to prepare for business again. And people finally welcomed the dawn, for the first time in half a year. I walked out of the basement, opened the doors and windows, and greedily breathed in the fresh air. I looked up at the blue sky, and while smiling, I suddenly burst into tears. In fact, I didn't know why I was crying. Maybe it was because I had survived the disaster and I was glad that I had finally survived this catastrophe that I thought about going home to take a look. But I found that my car had been frozen and couldn't start. I could only go back inside. In the 6.5 months of the extremely cold apocalypse. The buses in the suburbs started running again. I finally took Lily back to our home in the city, looking at the deserted streets that used to be bustling and the quiet community that used to be full of life. I suddenly felt sad again. I didn't know how many people had survived this catastrophe. And I didn't know how many people had died in this extremely cold weather. I pushed open the door, ready to return to my long-awaited home, when I suddenly heard a familiar voice. Long time no see. I turned around abruptly and saw Fiona. She was holding a suitcase and smiling at me. It was great. She was still alive. And this was the only person who had given me warmth and was still alive. Lily excitedly jumped into her arms. Looking at this heartwarming scene, I smiled and replied to her, "Long time no see." The two of us looked at each other and smiled. We didn't say anything more. And there was joy of rebirth after the disaster on our faces. Later, I heard from other survivors in the community that except for me, Lily, and Fiona, everyone in my unit had been frozen to death in the extremely cold apocalypse. As for Amy, she wasn't frozen to death. At that time, when people broke into her house, she was very sensible and chose to give up the right to distribute the food, although she was still not liked. Because she was good-looking and knew how to act coquettishly and please others. She wasn't mistreated too much. Of course, by not mistreated too much, it meant that she wasn't beaten or insulted. As for other things, only the dead Amy herself knew. But later, when the power was cut off and the electronic heating facilities in the house couldn't be used, the others were so cold that they actually came up with the idea of using human blood to keep warm. Amy was weak and became the first choice of the crowd, according to that survivor. She lived in the building opposite Amy's house. That night, she saw it clearly. Amy was held down by people, and her carotid artery was cut just like killing a chicken to drain the blood. The blood spurted out like a fountain, but those people greedily drank her blood, trying to get some warmth from it. When talking about this, she couldn't help but sigh. These people are so cruel. They didn't even think that even if they could keep warm for a while, why did they have to harm a life? I just smiled when I heard this and said, maybe they just wanted to survive at that time. Then I turned and left. In fact, I had expected that Amy would die. And I had also expected that she would die a miserable death. But I really didn't expect that she would be bled to death for warmth. There were obviously so many choices. Why did they choose to kill and use blood for warmth? Sure enough, whether it was in my previous life or now, my dear neighbors were always the same. In the face of death, they would always choose to sacrifice others to save themselves. I sighed, knowing that all my enemies from my previous life had died a miserable death and that I had gotten my revenge. I was surprisingly not very happy. Instead, I felt more emotional. I looked up at the sky again. Now, all I hoped was that such a catastrophe would never happen again.